The first thing Lucas Warner did when he walked into our Philadelphia office wasn't shake hands or learn anyone's name. He complained that the Herman Miller chairs didn't have enough lumbar dynamism. That's the exact phrase he used, lumbar dynamism. I'm Oliver Sullivan, 58 years old, and I've been building secure banking systems since before this kid knew what a firewall was. I sat in the back of the conference room with my lukewarm coffee, watching him pace around in a suit that cost more than my truck payment. Lucas was our new chief digital officer, brought in specifically to grease the wheels for the pending $650 million merger with Deutsche Bank. But from where I was sitting, Lucas wasn't grease, he was sand, and he was about to get poured directly into the gears of a machine I'd spent 28 years building. I'm the principal security architect at Mid-Atlantic Financial. In plain English, I build the vaults where we keep the money safe and the regulators happy. I don't talk much in meetings, I don't do trust falls or team-building retreats. I write code that works, encrypt data that needs to stay locked down, and go home to my son on weekends in my vintage Mustang in the garage. "Listen up, rock stars," Lucas announced, clapping his hands together. He had that manic energy of someone who drinks too much kombucha and listens to podcasts about disrupting industries. We have 8 weeks until the Deutsche Bank merger closes. 8 weeks to modernize our infrastructure. I've been reviewing the code base, and honestly, it's bloated with legacy systems. He said legacy like it was a dirty word. In the banking world, legacy usually means battle-tested. It means this code has survived market crashes, cyber attacks, and 3 different regulatory overhauls. But Lucas didn't see armor, he saw rust. "We need to be agile," Lucas continued, pacing so fast I got dizzy watching him. "We need to be lean. If a system isn't directly driving efficiency metrics, it's dead weight. We're migrating everything to a cloud-native architecture I implemented at my last startup." A murmur went through the room. His last startup had folded after a data breach that made the financial news, but nobody mentioned that. Everyone just nodded, scared for their jobs. "Oliver," Lucas said, pivoting to point at me, "you handle what? Internal security protocols? That sounds like a cost center to me." I didn't blink, just set my coffee down slow and deliberate. "I secure the data transfer tunnels. Without them, the merger documents are just text files floating on the internet for anyone to grab." He laughed. A short, barking sound. "Encryption, right? AWS handles that now. We don't need custom scripts clogging up the pipeline. Your department feels heavy. Feels like it got comfortable." "Comfortable?" I repeated, keeping my voice flat. "My systems are the only reason we passed the Federal Reserve audit last year." "That was last year," Lucas dismissed, waving his hand. "This is the future. We're cutting the cord. I want a full audit of your repositories by Friday. Anything that isn't critical to the user interface gets archived, and by archived, I mean deleted." The meeting ended with a flurry of buzzwords: synergy, paradigm shift, low-hanging fruit. I walked back to my desk with a cold, hard knot in my stomach. This wasn't restructuring. This was demolition. Lucas didn't understand the architecture. He looked at a load-bearing wall and saw something blocking his view. The problem was the wall he wanted to knock down, my Secure Vault Legacy.dlal, wasn't just some old script. It was the master authentication engine, a complex multi-layered system that generated the encryption keys for every single banking transaction we processed. Delete that, and you didn't just lose the code. You lost the ability to decrypt every loan document, every mortgage contract, and every merger agreement we'd signed in the past decade. It was designed to be secure. If someone hacked us, they couldn't read the files without the live generator, and Lucas wanted to delete it because he thought it looked outdated. I sat at my desk, surrounded by 3 monitors showing terminal windows. I could have marched into his office. I could have drawn diagrams. I could have explained the regulatory requirements. But I knew guys like Lucas. If I fought him directly, he'd see it as a challenge to his authority. He'd fire me for resistance to change and then delete the code anyway. No, I needed a different approach. My email pinged. It was Ryan Torres, our junior systems admin. "Hey Oliver, did you see Lucas just revoked admin access for the security team? Says he wants to approve all changes personally to ensure architectural consistency." I checked my terminal. Access denied. Right privileges revoked. He had locked me out of systems I'd built from scratch. He'd taken the keys to a vault and handed them to someone who thought password 123 was secure enough. A normal person would panic. A normal person would call HR. I felt that strange, icy calm settle over me. The same feeling I got debugging critical failures at 3 a.m. when millions of dollars hung in the balance. Emotion drains away, replaced by pure logic. If Lucas wanted to play God with the file system, fine, but I wasn't going to let him burn the company down without an insurance policy. I opened a terminal on my personal workstation, one that didn't log to the central server. I typed in a command I hadn't used in years, full system mirror. I wasn't just downloading files, I was cloning the entire repository, the history, the branches, the tags, and most importantly, the authentication logic that lived in subdirectories Lucas didn't even know existed. The progress bar crawled across the screen. 15%, 42%, 78%. Oliver. I minimized the window instantly. Lucas was standing at my cubicle, leaning over like a guidance counselor trying to relate to a troubled teen. "We need to talk about your attitude in the meeting," he said, straightening his tie. "I know change is hard. I know you old guard engineers get attached to your scripts. But I need team players. I need people who are hungry for innovation." I looked up at him, keeping my face completely blank. "I understand, Lucas. You want efficiency. You want modern solutions." "Exactly," he pointed at me, beaming. "See, you get it. I'm going to need you to hand over the documentation for your encryption protocols. I'm bringing in a consulting firm, some guys I know from Stanford, to rewrite everything in a more scalable framework." "Rewrite the authentication engine," I said slowly. "In 8 weeks? They're wizards, Oliver. Real innovators. Just give them the technical specs." "Sure," I lied. "I'll compile everything for you." "Great. And hey, let's try to smile more, yeah? This merger is supposed to be a celebration." He tapped my desk twice and walked away, already typing on his phone. I brought the terminal window back up. Status, 100% complete. I pulled a military-grade encrypted drive from my desk drawer, the kind they use for classified data. I plugged it in and moved the mirrored repository onto the drive. Then I ran a script to scrub the download logs from my machine. I wasn't stealing company property. I was saving its life. Or maybe I was preparing the weapon that would end Lucas's career. I hadn't decided yet. As I watched Lucas high-five the VP of Operations across the room, talking loudly about disrupting traditional banking workflows, I knew one thing for sure. He was going to delete the safety protocols. He was going to cut the parachute because he thought the backpack looked too heavy. And when he hit the ground, I wanted to make sure I was the only one holding the ripcord. The next morning, the office smelled like ozone and panic. Lucas had evidently pulled an all-nighter creating what he called Project Zero, redundancy elimination, a shared spreadsheet projected on the massive monitors in the main engineering bay. It was a kill list, rows and rows of file names, directories, and libraries highlighted in red. Next to each one was a status column, pending deletion. I walked in with my coffee and stood next to Ryan. Poor kid looked like he was about to throw up. "He's deleting the load balancers," Ryan whispered. "Look at row 23. He marked the traffic management script as redundant because he says the cloud provider handles it automatically. The cloud provider charges us $50,000 a month for that service," I said calmly. "My script does it for free." "He doesn't care about cost," Ryan said. "He cares about file count. Says we have too many scripts. Wants to reduce the repository size by 60% before the Deutsche Bank technical review." I scanned the list. My eyes stopped at row 47. Secure Vault Legacy.dl. Owner O'Sullivan. Reason for deletion. Obsolete authentication method. Non-standard implementation. Incompatible with cloud architecture. Action. Immediate purge. My heart didn't skip a beat. It slammed once, hard against my ribs. Obsolete authentication method. Secure Vault wasn't obsolete. It was the core of our entire security infrastructure. A custom encryption engine I'd written 8 years ago when we realized standard banking protocols were too slow for the volume of transactions we processed. Non-standard implementation was a security feature. If you could reverse engineer it easily, so could hackers. Lucas was looking at a nuclear reactor's control system and calling it a useless metal box. I walked over to the glass-walled conference room where Lucas was holding court with his consulting team. 3 guys in fleece vests who looked fresh out of college. "Lucas," I said, stepping into the room without knocking. "Row 47. The Secure Vault system. You have it marked for deletion." He looked up, annoyed. "Oliver, we're in a sprint planning session. Unless the building's on fire." The Secure Vault system isn't just authentication, I said, keeping my voice level. It's the key generator for all our encrypted documents. Delete that file, and every contract, every mortgage, every merger document becomes unreadable. Permanently. Lucas rolled his eyes and looked at his consulting team. One of them, a kid named Mason who probably still lived with his parents, spoke up. Actually, Oliver, we checked the dependencies. Nothing actively calls that script. It's orphaned code. It's not running because it's a background daemon, I explained, using small words. It activates only when documents are accessed. Check the system logs. We process 40,000 encrypted transactions daily. We checked the logs, Lucas interrupted. 0 activity in the last 48 hours, because nobody's tried to open a merger document in 48 hours. Lucas stood up. He wasn't smiling anymore. Oliver, stop. This is exactly what I'm talking about. You're hoarding legacy systems. You're clinging to outdated methods. He leaned over the table. Your code is messy. It confuses our new developers. It goes. End of discussion. I looked at him. I looked at Mason smirking at his MacBook. I looked at the whiteboard where they'd drawn their new architecture, basically arrows pointing to a cloud icon labeled Deutsche Bank Integration Layer. Something cold and sharp crystallized in my chest. The anger didn't vanish. It froze into something useful. Okay, I said. Lucas blinked. He'd expected a fight. You're the chief digital officer, I said. If you say it's obsolete, it's obsolete. I'll focus on the UI transition like you asked. Good, Lucas said, relaxing instantly. Good. I knew you'd come around. See? It's liberating. Letting go of the old ways. Liberating, I echoed. I walked out. Ryan was waiting in the hallway, looking terrified. Did you save it? He whispered. Did you convince him? No, I said, walking past him toward the break room. He's going to delete it. But Oliver, if he deletes the authentication engine, what happens to our encrypted files? I stopped and looked at Ryan. He was a good kid. He actually cared about doing the work right. Ryan, I said, do you remember when I taught you to never hard-code passwords? Yeah. And do you remember when I told you the smartest engineer isn't the one who writes the most code, but the one who knows where the backups are? He stared at me, confusion clouding his face. The code's next on the chopping block, I said. He'll wipe it by noon. Let him, I said, a small, cold smile touching the corner of my mouth. It's already gone. What do you mean? I mean the secure vault system on the server is just a shell now. The real logic, the mathematical core of the authentication system, is currently sitting in my desk drawer on a drive that Lucas couldn't crack in a million years. I went back to my desk and opened a support ticket. Ticket number 4401, confirmation of deletion order for Secure Vault Legacy.dll. Per CDO instructions, authentication engine deemed obsolete and approved for deletion. Security team advises against this action, but acknowledges executive override. 5 minutes later, my email pinged. Ticket closed. Status, approved. Comment, stop being dramatic, Oliver. Execute immediately. I saved the email as a PDF. I printed it. I put it in my bag. Then I opened my terminal and found the file on the server. I didn't delete it. I wouldn't do his dirty work. But I renamed it from Secure Vault Legacy.dll to Trash Code Do Not Touch Old.dll. If he wanted it gone, he'd have to drag it to the recycle bin himself, and I had a feeling he'd enjoy it. 3 days later, the executive conference room was packed. 25 executives, 4 board members, and Lucas, who was sweating through his expensive shirt. It was time for the alpha demo. The dog and pony show where Lucas was supposed to prove his lean, agile approach had revolutionized our merger platform. The Deutsche Bank partners were dialing in via video conference, their faces stern and expensive-looking on the big screen, looming over us like judges at a tribunal. I sat in the back row, wedged between spare HDMI cables and a dying ficus plant. I wasn't technically invited, but corporate protocol required a technical representative present in case something went wrong. Lucas had made it clear I was there to be furniture, nothing more. Ladies and gentlemen, Lucas began, gesturing at the projector screen, what you're about to see is the future of secure document management. We've stripped away the clunky, archaic interfaces of the past. We've streamlined the back end. We've created the digital banking portal. On screen, a sleek interface appeared, rounded corners, soft shadows, lots of white space. It looked beautiful, like an app you'd use to order coffee. As you can see, Lucas narrated, clicking his mouse, The user experience is frictionless. Drag, drop, done. He dragged a dummy file labeled merger contract draft.pdf into an upload box. A cheerful green check mark appeared instantly. Upload complete. Zero latency, Lucas bragged. In the old system, this took 45 seconds. Why? Because legacy encryption was choking on unnecessary security cycles. We've optimized the pathway. Now it's instantaneous. I crossed my arms. It was instantaneous because it wasn't doing anything. I could tell just by looking at the response time. No authentication handshake, no key exchange, no regulatory compliance checking. He was basically uploading a file to a public folder and calling it secure banking. Impressive speed, one of the Deutsche Bank executives said from the screen. And the security protocols? These documents contain sensitive financial data. Lucas didn't miss a beat. Military-grade encryption. We utilize a proprietary cloud-native security envelope that wraps the data in dynamic authentication layers. Dynamic authentication layers. He was making it up as he went. And the historical archive? The German executive asked. We need to verify timestamps on the loan portfolios from 2019 before we finalize the acquisition. Fully integrated, Lucas lied smoothly. We've migrated all legacy data to the new portal. Everything's accessible through a single dashboard. He clicked on the archive tab. The screen populated with a list of file names. It looked perfect. Then he made the mistake of looking back at me. Maybe he felt my eyes boring into his skull. Maybe he just needed a scapegoat to elevate his own status. You know, Lucas chuckled, gesturing toward the back of the room, our principal security architect Oliver was very concerned we were moving too fast. He paused for effect. The room turned to look at me. Oliver's encryption methods were so complex, I think even he forgot how they worked half the time. Right, Oliver? A few executives laughed. The VP of Operations smirked. Classic power move. Undermine the technical expert to make risky shortcuts seem like genius management. I didn't frown. I slowly, deliberately crossed my arms and offered a polite, tight-lipped smile. Complexity is often mistaken for confusion by the uninitiated, I said. My voice wasn't loud, but in the acoustic dead zone of the conference room, it carried. The laughter died instantly. Lucas's smile faltered for a microsecond before he recovered. Right. Well, complexity is the enemy of execution, he said, turning back to the screen. And as you can see, we are executing. He clicked on a file in the archive. 2019 Loan Portfolio/Summary PDF. A loading spinner appeared. It spun and spun. Just a little network lag, Lucas said quickly. Hotel Wi-Fi, am I right? The spinner disappeared. The file didn't open. Instead, a generic document placeholder appeared, the kind you see when a file is corrupted. Preview is rendering, Lucas said, sweat starting to bead on his forehead. But trust me, the data integrity is there. I looked to my left. Andrew Cross, our general counsel, wasn't watching the screen. He was looking at me. He was the guy who drafted the merger requirements, including the clauses about verifiable digital authentication chains. Andrew raised an eyebrow, a silent question. I met his gaze and gave the tiniest, almost imperceptible shake of my head. Andrew closed his notebook. He didn't say anything, but the shift in his body language was tectonic. He knew. Lucas wrapped up the demo with slides about projected cost savings. We're ready for final data migration this weekend, he announced. Come Monday, the old system is history. As the room cleared, Lucas stopped by my chair. He was high on adrenaline. See, he whispered. Nobody cares about your mathematical formulas, Oliver. They care about the interface. They care about the story. It was a nice story, Lucas, I said, standing up. I just hope the ending holds up. You're just bitter because I'm deleting your life's work, he sneered. I'm not bitter, I said, slinging my bag over my shoulder. I'm observant. You showed them a menu, Lucas, but you didn't check if the kitchen was on fire. I walked out, let him have his victory lap. He didn't realize that migrating encrypted data without the active authentication engine was like moving 1,000 locked safes into a new building without bringing the combinations. He thought he was cleaning house. He was actually burning it down. The fallout started slow, like a crack in a dam. It began the next morning with a polite knock on my cubicle wall. Patricia Newman from compliance stood there holding a printed merger agreement like it was radioactive. Oliver, she asked, her voice trembling, do you have a minute? I have a question about the dual signature authentication protocols. I spun my chair around. What about them? She adjusted her glasses nervously. I was reviewing the technical specifications Lucas sent over for the new portal, and I can't find any reference to dual signature authentication. Banking Regulation 12 CFR 2225 specifically requires all merger documents to be secured with immutable timestamp verification. I leaned back. Regulation 12 CFR 225. Yes, I wrote the technical implementation for that requirement myself 4 years ago. So where is it in the new system? Patricia asked. Lucas said the system is streamlined, but if we don't have dual signature compliance, the Federal Reserve's automated clearance system will reject the transfer. The merger funds won't process. This was it. The smoking gun. Lucas's portal was just a web interface. It didn't have the back-end authentication logic to generate the legally required cryptographic signatures. That logic lived in securevaultlegacy.dll, the file Lucas had marked as trash. Did you ask Lucas about this? I asked. I did, Patricia whispered, looking around. He told me not to worry about regulatory technicalities and that the cloud wrapper handles compliance automatically. Cloud wrapper, I repeated. Patricia, there is no cloud wrapper. That's marketing terminology. Patricia's face went pale. But he showed us the demo, files uploaded, green checkmarks appeared. I looked her dead in the eye. Patricia, you can program a green checkmark to appear when you click a button. That doesn't mean the data was processed according to federal banking regulations. It just means the button works. She swallowed hard. So the system he demonstrated isn't compliant? I'm saying, I replied, lowering my voice, there is no system. There's a front end. There's a database. But the bridge between them, the authentication engine that satisfies federal requirements, is currently sitting in a folder marked for deletion because Lucas thinks the file name looks ugly. Patricia clutched her binder. If we miss the regulatory compliance window, penalty fees alone are $2 million per day. I know, I said. Oliver, you have to fix this. You have to restore the authentication system. I can't, I said, gesturing to my screen. My access was revoked. Lucas controls the repository. If I touch anything, I'm violating direct executive orders. I could be fired for insubordination. Patricia practically ran toward the executive wing. By 2 p.m., the atmosphere had shifted from busy to crisis mode. Lucas's office door had been closed for an hour. Through the glass, I could see Andrew Cross and Patricia gesturing wildly. Then the door flew open. Oliver! Lucas bellowed. He marched to my desk, followed by a man I didn't recognize, a severe-looking guy in a charcoal suit carrying a heavy laptop. This was Nicholas Hayes, the external auditor from Deutsche Bank. Mr. Hayes is having trouble validating system integrity, Lucas said through gritted teeth. He seems to think there's a technical gap. Hayes stepped forward. He looked like he ate tax codes for breakfast. Mr. Sullivan, I'm attempting to run standard compliance verification against your current authentication system. Hash validation passes for static files, but when I try to generate a regulatory session key, the system returns null values. That's strange, Lucas interjected. It worked perfectly in the demo. The demo was a UI mock-up, Lucas, I said calmly. I turned to Hayes. You're trying to validate against Secure Vault authentication, correct? Correct. The dual signature key encapsulation mechanism returns empty responses. That's because Secure Vault has been deprecated, I said. We're migrating to a cloud-native solution. Lucas's eyes went wide. Just fix it, Oliver. Generate whatever test file he needs. I can't generate authentication keys using a system you flagged for deletion, Lucas. That would be deploying deprecated code. I am ordering you to generate a valid authentication key, Lucas shouted. The entire office went silent. I looked at Hayes. Do you have a test payload? Hayes handed me a USB stick. It's a dummy merger contract. Encrypt it using federal dual signature standards. If you can decrypt it and verify the digital signature, we pass compliance. I took the stick. Here was the moment of truth. I could have fixed it. I could have pulled up my hidden backup, run the authentication from my encrypted drive, and saved Lucas's career. But Lucas was standing there vibrating with arrogance, treating me like a vending machine he'd kicked to get free candy. I typed a few commands, pointing the system to the current repository, the one Lucas had cleaned. Encrypt payload, merger contract test.pdf using Secure Vault authentication. The terminal blinked. Error, authentication library not found. Secure Vault legacy.del missing or corrupted. I turned the screen so they could see it. It won't run. The authentication engine is gone. You marked it for deletion. "You sabotaged this," Lucas screamed, pointing a finger in my face. "You hid the dependencies. You made it fail on purpose." "I didn't hide anything," I said, my voice rising just enough to carry to the silent audience behind us. "I told you about this. Row 47 on your spreadsheet. You said it was obsolete. You said it was trash code. You ordered it deleted. I am the chief digital officer," Lucas roared. "If I say something works, it works. You're obstructing a merger." He turned to Stephen Mitchell, the security guard by the elevators. "Escort him out. Revoke his badge. He's a security risk." Hayes looked shocked. "Mr. Warner, terminating your lead security architect during a compliance audit is highly irregular." "He's not an architect," Lucas spat. "He's a roadblock. Get him out." Stephen, who'd known me for 12 years, looked apologetic. "Oliver, I know, Stephen," I said. I stood up. I didn't pack a box. I didn't grab my coffee mug, just took my jacket and the encrypted drive in my pocket. I looked at Lucas one last time. He was red-faced, panting, convinced that removing me would remove the problem. He didn't understand that the problem was me holding up the roof. "Good luck with the audit, Lucas," I said. "And remember, delete all is not a debugging command." I walked to the elevators feeling every engineer's eyes on my back. They were terrified, watching something rare, the captain throwing the navigator overboard because he didn't like the weather report about icebergs. The elevator doors closed on the sound of Lucas yelling at Ryan to find the backup files. There were no backup files on the server. The backup was in the elevator going down. I went home, poured a bourbon, and sat on my porch. The Philadelphia evening air was crisp. My neighbor's dog wandered over for scratches. It was peaceful. My phone, however, was having a seizure. First, a text from Ryan. Holy crap, he actually deleted the authentication folder trying to reset the cache. Everything's showing red error codes. Then the calls started. Missed call, Lucas Warner. Missed call, Andrew Cross. Missed call, unknown number. Probably the CEO. Back at the office, I knew exactly what was happening. When Lucas tried to fix the problem by clearing what he thought was corrupted cache data, he triggered the failsafe I'd engineered 6 years ago. The system was designed to detect tampering. If the primary authentication engine was removed without proper decommissioning protocols, the entire archive locked down. It was a feature, not a bug, designed to prevent hackers from wiping logs to cover their tracks. If the authentication system vanished, the vault slammed shut. Right now, every merger document, every loan contract, every regulatory filing was encrypting itself with randomized keys. Without the authentication engine to reverse the process, those files were digital noise forever. I took another sip of bourbon, imagining Lucas staring at screens full of access denied, authentication required messages. My phone buzzed with a voicemail. I decided to listen, just for educational purposes. It was Lucas, breathing hard. Oliver, look, maybe we got off on the wrong foot. Things got heated. That's just my leadership style. But I need you to come back and clarify some system parameters. The authentication module is requesting a root seed verification. Just call me back. We can discuss your severance package, or a bonus, whatever you want. He still didn't get it. He thought this was a negotiation. He thought he could buy the mathematics. The next morning, a courier delivered an envelope. Inside was a consulting contract. Rate, $1,500 hour. Scope, emergency system recovery. Signed, Andrew Cross, General Counsel. I drove back to the office. My keycard still worked. Stephen had forgotten to deactivate it. The executive conference room was chaos. The CEO looked like he was chewing broken glass. Deutsche Bank executives were demanding answers via video call. Lucas stood at the front, haggard and desperate. We experienced a minor cache corruption, Lucas was explaining, his voice cracking. But we've implemented workarounds. He clicked on the merger contract. The screen turned red. Critical error, authentication failed, document chain corrupted, federal compliance violation detected. What is this? A German executive demanded. Where is our merger contract? You lost the contract, the CEO whispered. It's sabotage, Lucas screamed. It's the legacy code interfering. I pushed the doors open. I didn't sabotage anything, Lucas, I said. I left load-bearing infrastructure. You demolished it. The room froze. Lucas pointed at me with a shaking finger. You did this. I didn't touch the authentication system, I said. You marked it for deletion. You said it was obsolete. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the military-grade encrypted drive. The authentication system you wanted eliminated? I made a backup. Lucas lunged forward. Give me that. I don't work here, I said calmly. You fired me yesterday. Oliver, please, the CEO begged. Name your price. I looked at the drive, then at Lucas, broken, his arrogance stripped away. The code wasn't the product, I said. The code was the lock. The product was the engineer who knew how to turn the key. You fired the product. 3 hours later, I walked out with a signed contract. $2,500 per hour, 6-month minimum engagement as chief security consultant, and full authority over the authentication infrastructure. The $650 million merger would proceed, but under my terms. Lucas cleaned out his office that afternoon. As I drove home in my Mustang, I realized something. The legacy system was gone, but the engineer who built it, he was just getting started. Sometimes you have to let them burn the house down before they understand who built the foundation. The bourbon tasted especially good that night.